Okay, what if I told you that there's a whole bunch of really rigorous, peer-reviewed scientific research out there that's just been, well, completely ignored? And why? Simply because what it found was just too wild, too radical for the mainstream. Today, we're going to dive into the evidence for ESP, and you'll see how it might just shatter our whole understanding of reality.
So let's just start with a question, and it's one that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. Can an animal read your thoughts? I know, it sounds impossible, right? But the answer, well, it just might blow your mind. And it leads us to one of the most incredible, frankly, unbelievable case studies I have ever encountered. This little guy here is Nkisi, an African gray parrot, and his owner, a woman named Amy, made a pretty wild claim. She said their connection was so intense, so deep, that he would actually comment on her dreams while she was having them, like in real time. Now, you can imagine, a claim like that gets some attention. It reached a Cambridge biologist, Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, and he just knew he had to find out if this was for real. All right, so let's dig into the story of Nkisi, the parrot with the secret thoughts. And I need you to understand, this wasn't just any parrot. We're talking about a bird with a vocabulary of more than 1,500 words. Absolutely incredible. I mean, even the legendary Jean Goodall was stunned by him. When she met Nkisi, he actually recognized her from a picture he'd seen. And get this, he immediately came up with a brand new phrase, got a chimp, a word he'd never even used before. So, okay, we've established the bird as a genius, no doubt about that. But the real question is, was he telepathic? Dr. Sheldrake decided to set up a very specific experiment to find out for sure. And look, this wasn't just some casual observation. This was a serious, tightly controlled, double-blind experiment. Here's how it worked. Amy and Nkisi were put on completely different floors, about 55 feet apart. Then, a totally separate person would give Amy these sealed envelopes with random pictures inside. She had no clue what she was about to see. And all the while, synchronized cameras were rolling on both of them. The whole point was to answer one simple question. Could Nkisi somehow, some way, know what picture Amy was looking at? So let me give you a specific example from one of the trials. Amy opens up an envelope, and inside is a picture of a man leaning his head out of a taxi window. Remember, Nkisi is on a totally different floor. There is absolutely no way he can see this picture. None. And right at that moment, the exact moment Amy sees that picture, the camera on the other floor picks up Nkisi saying, "Careful, put your head out." Just think about that. It's not just that he got the image right. He gave a warning. It's contextual. It's intelligent. And this wasn't a one-off fluke. This kind of spooky, accurate stuff happened over and over again. So you gotta ask, right? What are the odds of that happening by chance? Well, after the team analyzed every single trial, they did the math. The chances that Nkisi's comments were just random guesses were billions to one. Not millions, billions. Just let that number sink in for a second. Okay, the science of knowing. Now, as absolutely incredible as Nkisi's story is, it turns out he's not alone. Not by a long shot. There are just countless stories out there about these strange, unexplainable connections, especially in the animal kingdom. Just take a look at the story of Lawrence Anthony. He was this amazing conservationist. People called him the elephant whisperer. When he died suddenly of a heart attack, something truly unbelievable happened. 2 days later, a whole herd of elephants that he'd rescued, elephants that lived miles and miles away, they traveled for 12 straight hours to get to his house. They just showed up, and they stayed there for 2 days, standing vigil, making these sounds of distress. Nobody called them, nobody sent a signal, they just knew. I mean, stories like that, they point to some kind of deep, fundamental connection that goes beyond what our current science can really explain. And it just begs the question, doesn't it? If animals can do this, what about us? What about humans? Well, that brings us to the most famous, most repeated ESP experiment in history. It's called the Ganzfeld experiment. Here's the setup. You have a receiver who's basically cut off from all their senses, goggles on, white noise in their ears. In another room, a sender is looking at a random image and trying to send it, mentally. The receiver then has to pick which image they saw from a set of 4. Now, simple math tells you that by pure chance, you'd guess right about 25% of the time. That's this first bar here. But when you look at the actual results from thousands and thousands of sessions, the hit rate is consistently around 31%. That's the second bar. Now, I know what you might be thinking. A 6% jump? That doesn't sound like a lot. But here's the thing. Statistically, over that many trials, it is absolutely massive. It's a huge deal. Dr. Dean Radin, who's one of the top scientists in this field, crunched all the numbers and said the odds of this result happening just by chance are, and I'm quoting him here, a gazillion to one. Yeah, a gazillion to one.
Okay, so this brings us to the big, obvious question, right? Science's materialist blind spot. If the evidence is this strong, billions to one, a gazillion to one, why on earth isn't this front page news? Why isn't this just accepted science? Well, the answer, it turns out, has a lot less to do with the data itself and a lot more to do with a philosophical belief system.
And that belief system is called materialism. It's the dominant worldview in science today. And what it basically says is that the only thing that's real is physical matter, the stuff you can touch and measure. So everything from a rock to your deepest thoughts and feelings is just a product of physical stuff. In this model, your consciousness isn't fundamental. It's just a weird side effect of your brain's wiring. And if you believe that, then something like ESP isn't just improbable, it's literally impossible by definition.
Dr. Rupert Sheldrake talks about this a lot, and he points out that this creates a huge conflict within science itself. On one hand, you have science as a method, a way of asking questions, forming hypotheses, and following the evidence wherever it leads you. But on the other hand, you have science as a worldview, a belief system like materialism. And sometimes that belief system can act like a filter, rejecting any evidence that just doesn't fit the pre-approved narrative. And believe me, this isn't just some abstract academic debate. For the scientists who actually dare to study this stuff, the professional cost can be absolutely brutal. Dr. Sheldrake gave a TED Talk called The Science Delusion. And you know what? They banned it. A psychiatrist named Dr. Diane Powell had her medical license revoked just for publishing a book about ESP. The message from the establishment is crystal clear. Challenge the paradigm, and you will pay the price. So if the old model, materialism, can't explain this evidence, then what's the alternative? Is consciousness fundamental? Well, there's a growing number of scientists who are pushing for a completely different way of looking at things, a truly radical new idea about what consciousness even is. Okay, so think of the traditional model like a pyramid. At the very bottom, you have physics, the foundation of everything. On top of that, chemistry, then biology. And then way, way up at the tiny little peak, you have consciousness, seen as just this strange little byproduct of all the brain activity underneath. But there's a huge problem with this model. It has completely failed to solve what's called the hard problem of consciousness. How does a lump of gray matter, a physical brain, create the experience of seeing the color red or feeling love? So the new model says, what if we've had the pyramid completely upside down this whole time? What if we just flip it? In this new view, consciousness isn't the little thing at the top. It's the huge, fundamental foundation at the bottom. It suggests consciousness didn't emerge from the universe emerged from it. This is a game changer, because in this model, the brain isn't a factory that produces consciousness. It's more like a receiver. Dr. Diane Powell has this perfect analogy. She says, think of the brain like your smartphone. Your phone doesn't create the internet, right? It's just a device that tunes in and accesses it. Well, what if the brain is the same thing? A biological receiver tuning into a vast universal field of consciousness. And if that's true, it perfectly explains how someone could receive an image from another room, or how elephants could know something from miles away. All right, so let's unlock our minds. If our brains really are receivers, that leads to another really important question. Why aren't we all walking around reading each other's minds all the time? Why isn't this just a normal, everyday thing? Well, the leading theory is that our brains evolved what's called a dissociative boundary. You can think of it like a psychological shield or a firewall. Its job is to filter out most of that incoming signal to create our solid sense of being a separate, individual self. And you can see why this would be essential for survival, right? I mean, just imagine trying to get through your day if you were constantly flooded with the thoughts, fears, and emotions of every single person around you. It would be total chaos. And that leaves us to a final, really profound question. If our brains are primarily filters designed to block out information to help us survive, then what exactly are we filtering out? And maybe more importantly, what incredible human potential is just waiting for us on the other side of that barrier?